New Year's Eve. I always liked that night, even though I never made a big deal out of it. There was something comforting about the illusion of clean slates, as if the turn of a clock could rinse off a year's worth of mistakes. Julia liked it more than I did. She was the sparkle, the champagne, the photos by the fire kind of person. Me? I was content with a quiet evening and a good drink. This year, we'd agreed to keep it simple. A movie at home, some snacks, a toast at midnight. She said she was going to meet a few old friends downtown, just for an hour or so. "You don't need to come," she told me that morning. "It's nothing formal. Just some old coworkers, haven't seen them in ages." She kissed my cheek, pulled her coat tight, and left in a blur of perfume and red lipstick. It was cold that night, a dry, biting wind that cut through my gloves. I'd been home alone for over an hour when I decided to walk out and get her something warm. Just one of those small, thoughtful gestures that don't cost much but say a lot. She loved hot chocolate, and there was this cafe on 9th she used to go to after work. I figured I'd swing by, grab a cup, maybe surprise her near the plaza if she was still out. I texted her, no reply. Not unusual, Julia had a habit of forgetting her phone was a two-way device. The streets were busy but not chaotic. People passed by in hats and scarves, couples laughing, kids chasing each other with sparklers, the scent of cinnamon and roasted nuts hanging in the air. It was the kind of night that made you feel like the world was, for a brief moment, soft again. I got to the coffee shop, a little corner place with frosted windows and white lights strung across the eaves. Inside, the air was golden and warm. I stepped to the side, pulling out my wallet, and that's when I saw her. At first, it didn't register. My eyes were just scanning faces, like anyone does when stepping into a crowded place. Then I froze. My feet actually stopped moving. Julia. She was sitting by the window, just to the left of the fake fireplace. She was laughing. No, not just laughing. She was glowing, leaning in close to a man I'd never seen in my life. He was older than me, maybe by 5 years, well-groomed, wearing one of those soft charcoal overcoats that makes a person look wealthier than they probably are. His hand rested on the table, close to hers, and the way they looked at each other. I've never once seen that look pointed at me. Then I saw it. Her hand moved to his chest, just rested there, casual, like it belonged. He smiled and lifted his hand, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. That dress. The Berg *NDY1. I'd spent half a week picking it out last year for our anniversary dinner. She'd said she loved it. "This color makes me feel grown. *XY, but not obvious," she told me. It had been months since I'd seen her wear it, and now she was here, wearing it for him. For a moment, I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe this was some look-alike. Someone with Julia's same laugh, same shade of red lipstick, same subtle freckle just under the left eye. But then she looked up. Her eyes met mine. She flinched. It wasn't big, just a subtle jerk of the head, like she'd touched something hot. She blinked fast, her mouth opened a little, and she looked toward the man, who hadn't noticed me yet. Then, in an instant, she stood up and made her way toward the door, coat half draped across the chair behind her. Not a word to him. I backed away from the door as she stepped outside. The cold hit us both. Her face flushed from the heat inside, mine burning from the shock. She closed the door behind her and stood there like it was me who owed her an explanation. "Oh," she said, adjusting her tone mid-breath. "That's Mark, an old friend, from college. His wife died last year. I told you about him, remember?" I said nothing. "We were just catching up. He's had a really hard time lately. I've been trying to support him. It's not what it looked like, okay? Not what it looked like." She didn't stutter, didn't look away. There was no guilt in her voice. Only that tone she used whenever she wanted to steer the conversation away from inconvenient facts. Calm, measured, as if reality was something she could rearrange if she just chose the right words. My jaw tightened. I didn't know what I was supposed to say. "Okay? I believe you? You shouldn't be touching his chest in a cafe I know you thought I'd never walk into?" I just looked at her, waiting for something else. To tell. A crack. Instead, she sighed and crossed her arms, her tone hardening. Were you following me? My head jerked slightly. What? You can't keep doing this, she said. Showing up, hovering. It's not healthy. I told you I needed space tonight. Why couldn't you just let me have that without this? She gestured vaguely toward the coffee shop behind us, as if I had somehow staged the entire thing. I wasn't following you, I said slowly. I came to get you a hot chocolate. She blinked. Something shifted behind her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or the beginning of it. Then it was gone again. I think we need to talk when we get home, she said coolly. Because your paranoia, your constant suspicion. It's too much, Adam. You're ruining every good thing we still have. I looked down at the cup in my hand. It was still warm. I'm not the one in there, I said. My voice cracked a little. You are. She turned away, as if that was beneath her. We'll talk later, she said, already walking. I followed her in silence. Not because I was ready to forgive or even argue, but because I couldn't trust myself to speak. My thoughts were a storm, but my mouth was a locked vault. There are moments when betrayal slices clean, and then there are moments like this, dull, jagged, slow-moving like glass dragged across flesh. By the time we got home, the party sounds from outside had faded. No countdown, no midnight kiss, no laughter, just the click of the door behind us, and a silence that wrapped around our home like a sheet of ice. She went upstairs without another word. I sat in the living room, coat still on, and stared at the cup of hot chocolate in my hand. It had gone cold. I replayed the image over and over again. Her hand on his chest, his finger on her cheek, the way she smiled like no one was watching. Except I was, and I wouldn't forget it. The silence after we got home wasn't just quiet, it was surgical. It didn't creak or breathe or drift like silence usually does. Cut. There was no fight, no apology, no explanation. Julia walked upstairs like nothing needed to be addressed. Like she was late getting back from the store, and I just happened to be in a bad mood when she got home. She didn't slam a door. That would have implied guilt or emotion. She just disappeared. I sat alone in the living room, still wearing my jacket, still holding that cup like it might answer something if I stared at it long enough. I didn't even drink it. I just sat there, letting the weight of everything press down on my shoulders, colder than the wind outside. For the next few hours, I tried to think of reasons, excuses really. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe Mark really was some broken-hearted friend from long ago. Maybe her hand on his chest was just comfort, and maybe the way he looked at her was just confusion, grief. Maybe the way her fingers touched his coat was misinterpreted by my brain, because I already doubted too much. But the thing was, I didn't doubt much. I used to, years ago. But somewhere along the way, I stopped letting myself think that way. Because if I had, I would have lost her sooner. And maybe that's what she was counting on. Upstairs, I could hear the sound of drawers opening and closing, light footsteps crossing the room, the faint click of her phone unlocking. At some point she laughed. Just once. Low and short, like something on her screen had amused her. Maybe a meme. Maybe a message. Maybe him. I sat in the dark. I let it all come rushing in. The late meetings. The early gym classes. The sudden interest in her appearance that didn't seem aimed in my direction anymore. The perfume. Not the one I bought her, but that new one with citrus and musk that made me sneeze. The forgotten details, like which coworker she was going out with. The sudden spikes in defensiveness anytime I asked a question. And those little phrases. I feel like you don't let me breathe. You're always watching. You're making something out of nothing. They had piled up over the past year. At the time, I believed her. I wanted to, because the alternative was worse. But sitting here now, with the echoes of that cafe scene still sharp behind my eyes, I couldn't pretend anymore. It wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. And the truth is, it had been knocking for a long time. I just didn't open the door. Back in April, I remember she'd started working later than usual. Her boss, some guy named Brett, was allegedly giving her extra reports to finish, but anytime I asked what they were about, she'd shrug it off. Just numbers, Adam. You wouldn't care. I'd wait up sometimes, only for her to walk in after midnight, smelling like peppermint and wine, hair tousled, cheeks flushed. I ran into coworkers on the way out, she'd say. It turned into drinks. I wanted to ask more, but I didn't, because asking felt like accusing, and accusing felt like losing. Then there were the gym sessions. Every morning, 6 a.m. sharp. But when I checked the calendar on her phone, there were no locations listed, no trainer names, just training repeated 3 times a week, sometimes 4. She never came home sweaty, just energized, and she always showered at the gym, allegedly. I never once saw the gear. And then there were the gaps. Gaps in time, gaps in signal. Her phone would die in the middle of conversations. Texts would go unanswered for hours, only for her to respond casually with, "Sorry, crazy day." One weekend, she told me she was going on a trip with her sister, but her sister posted photos on Instagram from a completely different state. When I brought it up, she said, "I told you it was just tentative. We changed plans last minute. You never listen." So I let it go. Again. But it wasn't just the lies. It was the shift. The way she stopped looking me in the eye. The way she'd recoil slightly when I touched her shoulder. The way she turned her phone over on the table when she got a message, then said, "Just spam." The kind of spam that makes you smile to yourself. She started keeping her phone on Do Not Disturb. At first, I assumed it was for sleep. Then she started doing it during the day, during dinner, during weekends. When I asked why, she said, "Because being constantly reachable is exhausting. You should try it." Then there was the bedroom. We hadn't touched each other in weeks. Months, if I was being honest. She always had an excuse. Exhausted. Cramps. Overwhelmed. Not in the headspace. And I was respectful. I gave her space. I didn't push. But the distance kept growing. And I blamed myself. That's what gets me most. I thought I was the problem. I thought maybe I was too quiet, too predictable, too boring. I started reading articles about how to reignite a spark. I bought her flowers for no reason. I made her breakfast in bed. I even cleaned the garage, which I hate doing, just because she mentioned it once in passing. None of it mattered. She was gone already. I just hadn't caught up. Eventually, I stood from the couch and walked upstairs. The hallway was dim, lit only by a small nightlight we'd plugged in years ago during a power outage. I stood outside our bedroom door, listening. Soft music was playing. I could hear her voice. Not speaking, but humming along. I knocked. Once. No response. I opened the door. She was lying in bed, propped up on a pillow, scrolling through her phone. She looked up at me and smiled like nothing had happened. "Hey," she said. "I thought you went to bed." I stared at her. "We need to talk." She sighed, setting the phone down. Face down, of course. "I really don't want to argue tonight, Adam." "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I just want the truth." "The truth about what?" I paused. "About Mark." Her face barely twitched, but I caught it. "I already told you," she said slowly. "He's a friend. His wife passed. I've been trying to be there for him." "You touched his chest." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It was a gesture." "He brushed your cheek." She rolled her eyes. "Are we really doing this?" "I saw you," I said. "I stood there for almost a minute. You didn't look sad. Or guilty. You looked happy. Comfortable." She blinked, looked away. "You always do this," she whispered. "You twist things. You don't trust me." "You're right," I said. "I don't." And for the first time, I meant it. She sat up, pulling the blanket tighter around her. "Do you want to go through my phone?" she said, almost challenging. "Would that make you feel better?" "No," I said. "Because if I have to, we've already lost." She looked down, picked up the phone again, started mindlessly scrolling. I turned and walked to the guest room. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just lay on the unfamiliar mattress, stared at the ceiling, and began connecting the dots that I'd ignored for too long. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a pattern. a trail. And I was finally following it. 2 days passed. I don't remember much about them. Just the way silence pooled in every room and how we seemed to orbit each other like strangers who happened to share walls. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was logistical. Do we have milk? Did you feed the dog? I'm running late. There was no confrontation. No follow-up to what happened on New Year's Eve. It was like Julia had decided that if we didn't talk about it, it didn't count. And maybe I was doing the same, at least on the surface. But inside, something had shifted. I didn't feel like a husband anymore. I felt like a witness. On the second afternoon, I was in my office downtown, trying to get through a backlog of invoices, when the receptionist buzzed through. Adam, you have a delivery. Courier just dropped it off. No return name. I got up, half distracted, and walked out to the front desk. She handed me a manila envelope, thin, creased at the corners, and slightly damp like it had been shoved under someone's coat in the rain. The label had my name, but the address was our old one. The house we'd sold 2 years ago. It must have been forwarded somehow. No sender. Just a small office number listed in one corner, 512B. I didn't recognize it at first, but something about the number stuck. It wasn't until later I remembered it was a suite in the business center where Julia used to work. Before she changed jobs. Before all this. I took the envelope back to my office, sat down, and stared at it. I wasn't in the habit of opening anonymous mail. But something about the timing, the return address, the lack of explanation, it all felt too specific to ignore. I slid my thumb under the flap and peeled it open. Inside was one thing. A photo. Grainy, black and white, maybe from a security camera. A hotel lobby, judging by the layout, patterned rug, modern chandeliers, the kind of place where everything smelled faintly of lemon and money. And there they were. Julia. And him. Mark, or whoever he really was. His arms were around her waist. Her head rested gently against his chest. They weren't rushing. They weren't hiding. They looked content. Smiling even. Not in the panicked, awkward way people smile when they're caught somewhere they shouldn't be. No, this was something else. This was a beginning. I flipped the photo over. A handwritten note was scrawled on the back in small, printed letters. December 31st, 1:24 a.m. I stared at that time again and again. 1:24 a.m. That was after we got home. That was after she told me she was going to bed early. That was after I lay awake in the guest room, thinking maybe, just maybe, I'd overreacted. She'd left the house, and she'd gone back to him. I set the photo on the desk, leaned back in my chair, and let the air drain from my lungs. So that's what it was. Not just a mistake. Not just an inappropriate coffee meeting. She didn't just fall into someone's arms. She walked into his life while still standing in mine. I stayed in the office hours past closing. I didn't answer calls. Didn't reply to emails. I just sat there, staring at that photo, slowly letting it rewrite the past year in real time. And it did. It rewrote everything. Every time she smiled faintly and said she was just tired. Every new perfume I didn't recognize. Every vague gym calendar. Every sudden push for space. It all twisted into something with edges. I hadn't been paranoid. I'd been naive. And suddenly, it wasn't grief I was feeling. It was clarity. People talk about heartbreak like it's loud. Like it screams and shatters and explodes. But mine came like snowfall. Cold. Silent. Slow. And once it settled, I saw the shape of everything buried underneath. I didn't cry. I didn't text her. I didn't storm out or call a friend or punch a wall. I opened my filing cabinet and reached into the back where I'd kept a brown folder, untouched for months. Inside were documents, contracts, shareholder agreements, licensing rights, paperwork that most couples would never dream of drafting unless one of them had already imagined an exit. I had, not because I wanted to leave, but because I wanted to be ready if she ever did. Julia and I started our business 5 years into our marriage, a warehouse logistics company, originally just 3 trucks and a friend's garage. It grew fast. Eventually, we registered it under both our names for tax reasons. But she'd never invested a cent of her own. She hadn't even attended the first investor meeting. It was mine. She just had a signature on paper. And fortunately, that paper included clauses she never bothered to read. One of them was a reputational clause, buried deep in the appendix, stating that if a co-owner engaged in conduct that could be reasonably construed as damaging to the brand or partners, their ownership could be dissolved pending legal review. Another clause protected intellectual property. Another outlined transition protocol for silent partners. She signed them all. I made sure of it. That night, after I got home, long after Julia was asleep upstairs, likely dreaming of her next excuse, I sat in the kitchen with those documents and opened a fresh email draft to my lawyer. Subject: Initiate transfer protocol. I attached everything. No anger. No explanation. Just the facts. The photo sat next to me on the table. Julia's face pressed against someone else's chest. Her smile easy. Her posture relaxed. It didn't break me. Confirmed me. I stayed up until 3 a.m. reviewing documents, highlighting key sections, and uploading backups to a secure drive. By morning, the message was sent. Legal proceedings would be quiet at first. A simple notification to revoke access. A meeting invite to finalize partner separation. No courtroom. No scandal. Just the slow removal of someone who thought I'd never move unless pushed. At 8 a.m., Julia came downstairs in her robe, rubbing her eyes like nothing in the world had changed. "Morning," she said, reaching for the coffee pot. "You were up late." "Yeah," I said. "Working." Something like that. She didn't notice the folder on the counter. She didn't see the copy of the photo I'd printed and slipped into my briefcase. She didn't ask. She never did. And for the first time in years, I was done offering answers. I walked out the door with nothing more to say. But everything already set in motion. The confirmation came faster than I expected. At 9:17 the next morning, my lawyer replied with a single sentence. "Understood. Initiating process now." No questions. No hesitation. He'd reviewed those clauses years ago when I insisted they be airtight. At the time, he'd asked if I was planning for divorce. I told him no, I was planning for reality. By noon, the system began locking her out. It started quietly. Her company email access was revoked first. Then her login credentials for the internal network. The shared financial dashboard went offline for her account. One by one, doors she didn't even know existed closed behind her. I was in a meeting when my phone started vibrating nonstop. I ignored it. 5 minutes later, my assistant leaned in and whispered, "Julia's here." I didn't look up from the spreadsheet. "Tell her I'm unavailable. She says it's urgent." I smiled faintly. Everything is urgent when the floor disappears. 10 minutes later, she stormed into the conference room anyway. No knock. No warning. Her face was flushed, eyes sharp with confusion and something close to fear. "Why can't I access anything?" she demanded. "My email, the files, all of it's gone." The room fell silent. Every executive present suddenly found their notes fascinating. I closed my laptop slowly and looked at her for the first time that day. "Because you're no longer authorized," I said. Her mouth opened, closed. "What does that mean?" "It means," I replied calmly, "that as of this morning, your co-ownership status is under legal review due to reputational breach." She laughed once, too loud. "You're joking." "I'm not." Her eyes flicked around the room, searching for support, for someone to intervene. No one did. "You can't do this without telling me," she said. "This is our company." "It was," I corrected, "on paper." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Adam, this is insane. You're overreacting." I leaned back in my chair. "You checked into a hotel with another man at 1:24 a.m. on New Year's Eve." The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you think you saw." "I saw enough." Silence swallowed the room. Finally, she whispered, "You went through my things." "No," I said. "Someone sent me a photograph." Her breath caught, just for a second. But that was enough. The meeting ended early. People filed out quietly, pretending they hadn't just witnessed a marriage collapse in real time. Julia stayed behind, standing across from me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her anymore. "This isn't what it looks like," she said. Again, always that line. "It's exactly what it looks like," I replied. "And now it has consequences." She tried everything after that. Messages first, long, rambling explanations about grief, confusion, boundaries she didn't realize she'd crossed. Then calls. Then she showed up at my brother's house, crying, claiming I was having some kind of breakdown. She said she needed time to explain. She said it wasn't physical. She said it didn't mean anything. I didn't respond, because while she was scrambling, I was moving. All joint assets were transferred into a holding structure by the end of the week. Accounts were separated. Access lists rewritten. Her name remained on nothing operational. She'd thought my patience was weakness. She'd mistaken silence for paralysis. She'd never seen me stop waiting before. On Friday night, she cornered me in the driveway as I got home. "Please," she said, grabbing my arm. "Just talk to me." I looked down at her hand, gently removed it. "We already did," I said. "You just didn't realize it was the last time." She stood there, shaking, watching me walk inside the house we'd built together. But it wasn't ours anymore. Not really. I slept better that night than I had in months. Not because I felt good, but because the noise in my head finally stopped. I didn't hear from Julia the rest of that weekend. Not directly. She knew showing up again wouldn't work. Not now. So she went the long way around. Monday morning, my brother called. "Hey," he said carefully. "She came by." I closed my eyes. "What did she say?" "That it's not what you think. That you're shutting her out before she can explain. She wanted me to talk to you." "Did you?" "Yeah," he said. "I told her you don't need help thinking straight." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "She didn't take it well," he added. "Left crying." "She's good at that," I said. There were more messages over the next few days. Long ones. Paragraphs that started soft. "I know I've hurt you," then shifted into gaslighting halfway through. "But this was years of neglect. Adam, you were already gone before I was." Each message sounded rehearsed. Not because she wrote it twice, but because she'd been saying these things to herself for months. I didn't respond to a single one. What could I say that hadn't already been said in silence? By midweek, she began posting again. Photos of wine glasses, out-of-focus skylines, cryptic captions like, "Some lessons come wrapped in pain," and "Growth never looks graceful at first." I didn't follow her anymore, but friends sent me **TS. I didn't ask them to, they just didn't want me walking around blind. The most telling one was a story she posted at 2 a.m. A picture of her hand resting beside a full glass of whiskey, her wedding ring removed, the caption, "When you finally accept you were never really seen." I almost laughed. That ring had been the only thing tying her to my name, and even that she used now for pity points. She'd always hated being the villain, so she repainted herself as the misunderstood one. The woman who lost herself in a marriage with a man who, in her words, stopped checking in. But I had checked in for 18 years, and when I finally stopped, she called it abandonment. That Friday, I attended a business event uptown, something we'd RSVP'd to months ago. I debated skipping it, but part of me wanted to be seen. Not out of revenge, out of closure. Lauren was there, a risk analyst I'd worked with on a project the previous year. Smart, direct, kind. We weren't close, but we'd always had an easy rhythm. We talked more recently. She'd helped save a major contract that would have unraveled without quick thinking. She greeted me at the entrance with a smile. "Didn't think you'd show." I didn't think I would either. We walked in together. Her arm gently slid into mine. Not in a flirtatious way, just easy. Unspoken solidarity. That was the moment the photographers noticed. Not paparazzi, just corporate event types with cameras and name tags, snapping photos for the quarterly newsletter. But their timing was impeccable. The flash caught our entrance just as we stepped under the main chandelier. That image ended up everywhere by morning, and Julia saw it. I know that because the next message she sent was only 2 words. Wow. Really? No context. No greeting. Just projection. No acknowledgement that she'd lit the match. Only shock that I stopped standing in the ashes. A friend later told me she was at the event too. I hadn't seen her, but she saw me. Saw us. Lauren didn't even know the backstory. She wasn't part of any plan. But her presence beside me did what 1,000 conversations never could. It told Julia, without words, that the door was closed. Permanently. The next letter came in a cream-colored envelope. Handwritten. No stamp. Just left at my office. 3 full pages. It started with a long explanation about grief, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. It mentioned therapy, childhood, her need to feel alive again. Nowhere did it mention cheating. Nowhere did it mention his name. Nowhere did it say sorry. It wasn't a letter of apology. It was a script written by someone who couldn't imagine being at fault, who still thought she could frame her betrayal as something brave. She ended the letter with, "I just wanted you to see me. Really see me. Not just the version you needed." I folded the pages once, neatly, and placed them in the back of a drawer. Not out of anger. Out of proof for myself that I didn't hallucinate the distance. That night, I opened my laptop and checked my cloud backups. A feature I'd forgotten existed until recently. A year ago, during system updates, our home assistant device had been backing up call logs and recordings to a hidden cloud folder. I hadn't looked into it since. But now, curiosity or closure got the better of me. I clicked open a few, and there she was, her voice, laughing, clear as day. No, he has no clue. Like zero. It's honestly scary how easy this has been. Another clip. I keep thinking he'll catch on, but he just goes along with whatever I say. I almost feel bad. Almost. I stopped listening after that. I didn't need more. I didn't need to send it to anyone. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to remember. Not because I was angry, because I was done blaming myself. The night she walked into that coffee shop wasn't the night I lost her. It was the night I realized I'd already been gone. And now, finally, so was she. A week later, at another event, Lauren walked in beside me again. Calm, confident. We didn't say much, but we didn't need to. When we stepped into the room, cameras flashed, murmurs rose. I caught Julia across the hall. Her eyes met mine, then dropped. No wedding ring on my hand. She noticed. She paled. For once, she didn't come over. Didn't try to smile. Didn't pretend. I wasn't hiding anymore. That version of me, the man waiting in the shadows, was gone. And she knew it. A letter arrived a few days later. 3 pages long. All about how she was tired, misunderstood, never truly heard. There was no mention of guilt. No apology. Just accusations disguised as reflection. In her version, I was cold, distant, impossible to reach. She painted herself as the victim of my silence. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I had the recordings. Her voice, laughing, saying, "He has no idea." I didn't send them to anyone. I just saved them, because I didn't need justice. I just needed truth.